Conversations always right beforehand are a little bit weird because you're like, I don't want to talk too much, or else that'll ruin what we're going to talk about. Hey everybody, Happy New Year! Hope it was great. Hope the holidays treated you special. It's me, Chell Hernandez, your old-time friend from Notes from My Improv Notebook, your internet's resource for some improv knowledge. I'm so happy to be back, and thank you so much for continuing on this journey with me. It's special, and you're a part of it, so I appreciate you. Before I get to the episode, we have a special interview today, but I won't spoil that because I am teaching a workshop at the San Diego Improv Festival February 9th at 2 p.m., and they are offering early bird sign-up specials if you sign up before January 15th. If you'd like more info, you can find that at finestcityimprov.com/SDIF/workshops 2019. On to the interview. I'm so stoked to tell you about one of the coolest people I know here in LA. So approachable, so likable. This dude is a walking improv knowledge book. I love him so much. You're going to enjoy this interview with Zach Huddleston. Yes, that's correct. The Zach Huddleston came to my podcast, and he said, I will do your podcast, after I asked him. And I said, woohoo! Zach, of course, is a member of Heyday, who performs at Westside Comedy Theater now. Used to perform at iOS. He also teaches at Westside Comedy Theater. So here is part one of Zach Huddleston. All right, thank you so much for tuning back into Notes from My Improv Notebook. This is Chell again, and I am so excited to have here a former artistic director of iOS, a current instructor at Westside Comedy Theater, and a co-founder of Improv Capital. Please give a listened round of applause.
Clap in your car. Clap on the treadmill, wherever you're listening to this. Clap. Yeah.
Clap. Please clap for Zach Huddleston.
Yay.
Woo! Thank you so much for doing my podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. It's my pleasure.
Not a problem. When I was thinking of lists of people that I really liked, you were right there on that list.
Oh, thank you.
Of course, we worked together when you were the coach of my team for the week at iOS. Basically, teachers got to choose one student per class, and they made a team of the top students of that class, and then we got to perform for a whole month at iOS stage. The name kind of escapes me. Honor Roll. Thank you very much. And I was on Honor Roll, which was a lot of fun, and Zach was my teacher. So I learned a lot from you, Zach.
Oh, thank you. And you were a wonderful student. Just a very quick aside. So I was the artistic director, and I don't know, was I the artistic director when we had that, or that might have been before?
At that time, it was before.
Yes, and I was just a
I was
teacher.
in classes. Yeah.
So I pitched that idea to the person who's the artistic director before me as just it'd be fun if we did an honor roll thing where we picked all the best students and made them into a team for a month, and then flash forward the next week, hey, we made that thing and you're in charge of it and get to do it. But which was wonderful, and I enjoyed it all. And selfishly, I never would have anticipated this, but I got to meet all the best students that were coming through IO.
Oh, awesome.
And so many of them are still friends and collaborators and everything. It was I got to have my own little Skull and Bones or something like that.
Yeah, you were a matchmaker, essentially.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was your idea. You were a producer, basically. I should add a producer to your credits.
Well, yeah. That might be misleading. People might think, what does he do, movies?
No way. Producers do really cool things. You actually created a project. What came up with this idea? Were you just thinking out loud, or what happened to come up with Honor Roll?
I can't remember the exact context. I think it was some kind of maybe theater meeting or teacher meeting or something like that. And we were talking about, at the IO, there was a long-running program called The Lottery that was very successful. And that was one student from every level was randomly drawn. And it would often be and they would do shows for a month and kind of rehearse for a month. And they were very fun shows. And it was such a great opportunity for students. Because as you know, especially maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, there wasn't always a lot of opportunity for students to be performing outside of class.
There wasn't.
Yeah. And so it was like great for them to be able to perform. They also got to meet people that weren't in their specific class and work with people, and they would work with kind of like more veteran improvisers. And it was just kind of like a universally beloved program. And I was like, oh, why don't we have 2 of those,
Yeah.
And so that, and it was kind of also, I think one thing that theaters not struggle with, but like a challenge they face is like the split of like meritocracy versus egalitarianism. Like on the one hand, improv is very much like, everybody come on in and you're all welcome and we're all equal and all that. And that's wonderful. And that's a great part of improv. But we also need like at least a little bit of that. Like, and also the people that are the best, we kind of need to usher you to the front of the line, because like we want you to get the most opportunity and we want you to stay here, and we want...
You want the theater to be representative by your best,
Yes.
like ambassadors. I totally agree with that. And how cool to think of an idea to really engage your student base, because a lot of this, I think at earlier levels for students is like they're nervous to kind of make those moves to perform in that space, because you guys put them on main stage. At iOS, they had 3 different theaters, and this was the biggest theater. What a cool opportunity to take in order to get used to performing in that space. And because those students perform in that space, if they walked away very positive from that experience, you know they're going to come back constantly to this iOS. So that student engagement idea was a wonderful idea.
Yeah, I mean, even just on a crass business level, I think if in level 1 or 2, and also, I mean, one thing I definitely learned like working in management was like the value of like compliments or a reward in some way, right? Like telling somebody like, you're doing great, like we want you to do more, goes so far, whether they're doing great or not. Yeah, no, they were always doing great, right? But
way to mess up.
Yeah.
I really like your messing up.
Well, and you know, like one of the joys of improv, one of the big things that hooked me was like the ability to meet and connect and work with like-minded individuals and to put talented people with other talented people they might not know, and to see them kind of spark and joy. Like IO's been closed 10 months, something like that. I'm coaching a group that formed out of the honor roll.
Oh, wow.
And still exists as like an independent team. That says something, right? Again, when you put funny people together, they're going to like each other sometimes. And, and sometimes they'll want to keep performing together and all that kind of stuff. I think that's the great thing about improv, like being able to find collaborators and partners and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love the aspect that this art form, I know when I first watched it, I was like, you can create anything and nothing stops you. Like, I'm addicted to that. That is I love this art form so much. And that is what actually attracted me. What's really cool is that other people believe the same thing. So because we're all launched towards the same goal, like things that are created really surprise me. And that's what keeps me coming back, is that I'm surprised by the work that's put on when I'm with other like-minded people. And it really speaks to like overall life, where it's just like if we all have a common goal and we all want to succeed in that direction, we can surprise ourselves to what we'll get.
Yeah.
You started at iOS, is that correct? And then you became a teacher, and then you went all the way up to artistic director.
Yeah, all in like 3 weeks. It's very impressive.
They didn't have any students, and they're like, we need teachers. We have too many students. How was that process for you? Do you feel like being at one theater really helped you in terms of how you trusted yourself to move on? Or was it like, what was your experience from student to teacher? That's what I'd really like to know.
Yeah. Well, and I would love to say that it was like all purposeful and planned and like strategic, but it was just kind of by default. Because like I was studying at other theaters, but like I was maybe given more opportunities at IO, or felt more at home, or lived closer to IO. It's like all these like weird environmental things that conspire to create your path in life. And so I went through classes, and I was lucky enough, I got put on a Herald team when I was still in class, which again was probably a stroke of luck and maybe a factor of in the mid 2000s, there was open spots available or whatever, when I was there. And so I was on a Herald team and other shows and teams at IO for probably 5 or 6 years, kind of just, never leaving, just hanging out a long time and making myself available. And then actually, so my father died, and I was kind of home for his kind of the end of his life and his funeral. And I kind of came back to LA after that. And I was like, after any kind of big life moments, maybe a marriage or a funeral or a firing or whatever, you often kind of reassess things. And I was like, you know what? I want to teach. And so I sent a cold email to the training center director and the artistic director.
Oh, wow.
It was just like, and I knew both of them. They had obviously interacted with me just around the theater. And I was like, hey, I know probably plenty of people are asking about this, and I know there's probably a long line and whatever, but just know that I'm interested in teaching and I'm happy to jump through any hoops or just begin that process. And, I got the form response of like, okay, good to know, thanks. And then like 2 weeks later, they're like, we just had a teacher quit or have to leave a class or something like that. Can you start teaching? And again, like everything else, just serendipity and the fortunate timing or whatever.
Yeah.
And so from then on, I was teaching, and then like 3 or 4 years later, there was an opportunity to become an artistic director, and I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't have been teaching. And yeah.
Wow. When you were first pushed into that very first teaching experience, what was it like? Because to me, I feel like when you're first put into that teaching experience, it's how when an improviser first enters that stage of like, okay, I guess we're doing everything that I'm taught. I'm going to just try to do.
Yes, you're doing your impression of a teacher more than anything else. Well, I just read this thing that jives with me so much. And I'm going to mess up the name, but it's like, this is from the 70s, and there's some like corporation or think tank or something that came up with this, like the 4 stages of learning. Mm-hmm. And the first stage is ignorant incompetence, and I might mess up some of these words, but it's like basically you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Right. And that's like a level 1 student, and, who wanders in, and it's just like whatever. And then the next stage is what's the opposite of ignorance? Competent incompetence or something like that, where basically like, it's like your level 3 student who knows what improv is supposed to be. They're unable to get there most of the time. Yeah. Right. And then the third stage is like competent. So it's unconscious incompetence. It's conscious incompetence. The third stage is conscious competence. Right. And this is, I think, where like most improvisers live, especially maybe once you've graduated a program, once you've been doing it for a year or two, where like, what good improv should be. You can get there. It takes a lot of work, right? And it's very conscious. You're constantly having to remind yourself. You have to be coached very heavily. You screw up a lot. And then kind of the final level of learning is unconscious competence, where you no longer have to think about it. Oh, wow. You're just instinctually good. Yeah. And like in reading that, I was like, oh man, that so jives with my experience. And I feel like I vacillate still between all 4 of those levels all the time.
You go back to, and then you're like, oh, what am I doing here?
Yes. But certainly, and you kind of like, you climb those levels as a performer, and then you kind of have to start over as an instructor. Yes. Right? And you maybe work your way up as a coach or a teacher through those same levels. And certainly when I started, it was unconscious incompetence, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I was kind of, you have a curriculum to fall back on, and you have people you can ask for help and things like that. But like, I'm still friends with some of the people who are in the very first class I taught, and they're kind humans. So they're always like, no, you were great. But I'm like, no, guys, I wasn't. I'm so sorry. Please take a class with me now. I'll show you. I've gotten better.
Please don't lie to me. I know how bad I was. That is such a good way to bring awareness to the process of learning. I love that. 4 stages of learning, because to me, it does feel like we still go through those phases, like you were saying, especially like when we plateau with a certain skill, right? Because when we plateau as improvisers or as people, I think we've become conscious of like, well, what am I missing here? Something's missing. And then we become conscious of it. And we're like, well, the thing that I'm not doing is A, and then you become so aware of it, you're trying to do it until it becomes instinctual. Yes. That is so cool.
Well, and I think I was talking with Lloyd Alquist and Carla Kukowski at the Westside Theater. Carla's the training center director. Lloyd's one of the owners. They're both very talented performers and teachers. But we were talking about this the other day and talking about how like often, especially maybe if a theater has 5 or 6 or 7 levels, those last 3 or 4, you're probably spending almost all your time in that conscious competence level where it's like very difficult. You've acquired taste. You've been taught by enough people that yes and don't ask questions and all these kind of little rules in our head. And yet it's clunky. It's hard. Can be joyless. I think a lot of students struggle when it's like, oh, I was having fun in level 2. Level 4, I'm not having fun, right? And it's because they're in that level where, conscious competence is not fun. Yeah. And if anything, like when you didn't know what you were doing wrong, you're having a blast. And now you know what you're doing wrong. So you're constantly judging everything and like, kicking yourself afterwards and giving yourself notes and getting notes from other people and all these kind of things. I think that's like one of the biggest struggles of a teacher or maybe a coach of a team is like while teaching, noting all these things, like to nudge people towards that unconscious competence of like, okay, we've run the exercises and we know what to do. So now forget everything and go out there and be your best self, you know? Because it's the only place you're going to have fun.
Yeah, and that's so true. What brings us to, or those students, what they're having fun to is that non-judgment and just like going out there and be like, I'm just making stuff up, right? And then to be aware of like, well, you can make stuff up, but if you want to make stuff up at a high level, these are the paths to follow. Be like, dude, I'm too aware. That's not, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up to go out there, shout some words, make some relationships, and then come back down.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is so right. It's learning how to, and I think I'm going through this now as I'm growing older. It's learning to be aware of yourself, right? It's like understanding your own patterns and being aware of your own self is very enlightening, humbling, sometimes sad because you're like, I can't believe I keep doing this.
Yeah.
Where like in your 20s, right, you just left home, so you're just excited. You're just doing things, right?
Yes.
And you don't care about any
and there's
consequences.
a dumb confidence there.
Yeah.
A cocksureness.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you don't realize the mistakes or whatever you're making or don't care or are just so excited it doesn't matter.
Yeah. That's so oh my God. Oh, that's so improv. That was part 1 of Zach Huddleston. Wasn't that great? You were excited. I could tell you were excited. Anyways, if you want more information from Zach Huddleston, he said you can invite him to your show and he will show up. So if you want to play with Zach, shoot him a message on Facebook at Zach Huddleston. His link will be in the bio, the description. He teaches at Westside Comedy Theater, so if you like what he's talking about, go to Westside Comedy Theater, take a class from him, and then watch him perform there. Or go to the Sacred Fools Theater where he performs on a show called League of Fools. If you are a business and you're like, well, I only listen to this podcast because I need some business improv workshops, he's got you covered too. His new business, Improv Capita, focuses on business skills with improv backgrounds. So check it out. And I will see you soon for episode 2. Zach is so nice. He is just so nice.